Welcome to the CHOW Podcast, hosted by Animal Friends of Wyoming County, where our mission is to help care for animals held by the Wyoming County Animal Shelter and promote responsible pet care in Wyoming County. Thank you for joining us. Welcome, everyone, to the Animal Friends of Wyoming County CHOW Podcast. I am your host, Sam Goodell, the president of Animal Friends of Wyoming County. And today we're going to be jumping into a brand new topic here on the podcast we've never touched upon before. Usually we just talk about dogs and things that are going on at the animal shelter and animal awareness type things for our companion animals. But today we're going to be branching out a little bit more because we are located in Wyoming County, New York. Anyone who knows anything about Wyoming County is a little funny saying that we have more cows than people, and that statistically is true. So today we're going to be jumping into cows, in particular agriculture in general, and more along the lines of the public perception and what you may know about it from your conversations or from what you hear in the media or in the news, things like that. But we're going to do a little bit more of an in-depth detail and discussion about that and what is true, not true, some of the misconceptions, and what we can do to fix it. We have an amazing guest here today that's going to be helping us break down all those details. But before I introduce her, or let her introduce herself, I should say, we have two co-hosts today that are joining me on the podcast. One of them is Miss Lisa Reynolds. She's our members director. How's it going, Lisa?
It's going.
Good. Thank you for coming back. Welcome. This is Lisa's first time on our video version of the set. So that actually is something I wanted to mention too for everyone. If you're listening to this and we make like references to the television that we have here or anything that we're talking about for a visual aspect, we do have this podcast on YouTube and on Rumble as a video version. So please check us out there, subscribe to our channels and places like that. And if you're just listening to us in the audio version, that's fine too. Welcome. And joining me also today is a newcomer to Animal Friends of Wyoming County. He is our IT coordinator and media coordinator. He's going to dabble a little bit in both, but he specializes in IT. I'm going to let him introduce himself. So, hi, Audie. How's it going?
It's going great. How are you? So, myself, Aditya Singh. I'm a recent graduate from University at Buffalo with a master's degree in computer science and engineering. I've been friends with Sam, and I've recently joined Animal Friends of Wyoming County, and I'm originally from Mumbai, India.
Thank you. Well, welcome. Yeah, we've been friends for a while now.
Yeah.
And so he's living here in Western New York and Wyoming County in particular, and he's offered his talents and gifts to help us because, as you can see from this set here, we need some help with technical stuff. And he's a great volunteer here at the animal shelter, and I'm really blessed to have him in my life and in Animal Friends. So thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir.
All right, so let's segue onto here to talk about our talk with our special guest of honor. So I'm gonna let her introduce herself to the world. Hello, doctor.
Hello. I'm Dr. Shanti Nair. I'm a veterinarian. I know Sam from his work with PeriVet. I started out as a large animal only doctor. I'm actually from West Virginia, so I'm from down south, which this is the time of year every year that I wonder why I'm here, because we're getting close to winter. But I didn't grow up around agriculture really at all. I grew up in a little suburban neighborhood. My family doesn't have roots in agriculture. I ended up going to vet school in Southwest Virginia, and I remember our first week we had a cattle handling lab, because you have to learn about all the species in school, and I got to really interact with a cow for the first time, and I was hooked from there. And so I graduated in spring of 2022 and came up here to Western New York because they have more cows than people. So that is why I am here. So yeah, that's kind of where my roots and my start are.
Yeah, well, great. Thank you. Thank you for joining us on the podcast.
Thank you for asking me.
This is really, really cool. This is a topic that I've personally have been interested to learn a little bit more about. I may be from Wyoming County, and I may be right down the road from a big farm, but I don't know anything. I'll be the first one to admit that I am pretty, I might as well have been born and raised in the city because
Right.
there's just, I only know a little bit about agriculture from like when I go to the grocery store or actually started working at Perry Vet is where I started learning some of the terminology and different things. And I'm like, this is really its own unique world that is vitally important to not only Wyoming County, but to New York State and to the country at large. But I have this feeling that not too many people know enough about it or in the right sense of mind, like with right facts and details. So
Yeah.
that's what I'm really excited about for this episode, for especially for our audience, if you're just like me, who's kind of clueless to a degree on what it takes to be a farmer, what it takes to be a large animal vet or dealing with that type of animal or that industry. I'm hoping that this kind of enlightens you a little bit.
Yeah, you're not alone. Most people don't know. I didn't know. And you can live right next door to it, but unless you're in it, it's not something that you know about, because it is a whole nother world with its own lingo. And I would be the first to say I am not an expert in agriculture. I'm not a farmer. But I have taken a great interest and I'm professionally very invested in that intersection of health and agriculture.
Yes, thank you. So, I think you touched upon it a little bit, but before we get into the agriculture, like that main topic at hand, tell us a little bit about like your hobbies. What do you do outside of work?
Well, I work a lot. So I really have loved living in Western New York. I think from spring to fall, it's one of the most beautiful places to be. So I love being outside. I love kayaking. I've met some excellent friends here. I love that we live pretty close to Rochester and Buffalo. So, because I love museums and culture and different types of food, and not something we necessarily have in Wyoming County, but something we have pretty close by. So I tend to do those things, and I have 2 little guinea pigs at home named Truffle and Toast, who I just celebrated my 1-year anniversary of having them.
Oh, cute.
So they're my little sons, and they have way more personality than I ever thought little potatoes with sticks would have. They're lovely. So I like to snuggle them and give them salads.
Oh, awesome. That's real cool. Yeah, I too I kind of like where we are living to a degree, because we could classify ourselves as country, but
Yeah.
we're not too far away from city life. Like it's just about 1 hour away. We could be able to get into the inner city and things like that. We could do a lot more sightseeing, shopping, things like that. But we're
Artists come and go on tour.
yes.
We get access
Yes.
to that stuff.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm just waiting for my favorite artists to start coming on tour. But
know,
anyways,
right?
that's just a personal thing for me. Very unlikely Britney Spears are coming back. But if
Never
you do,
give up hope.
if you do, hit me up, please.
Never, yeah.
Anyways, but yeah, we could live in the country life where we could get away from the noise and the hustle and bustle and the fast pace if you don't want that. So we're in a really nice community here, and so that's why I really like to highlight is the people around Wyoming County and who do work in Wyoming County, such as yourself, to really showcase what Wyoming County, New York is about. Because this podcast, although we gear it towards Wyoming County residents, it's on YouTube. We're on Rumble. We're on any streaming platform you could think of, like Apple and Amazon. So anyone around the world can hear it. So now you get to have a little slice of Western New York that's
There you
different
go.
from city life. So this is going to be really cool.
Yeah.
So before we dive into the topic, we have to do a quick break. So we have to pay the bills, guys. All right, be right back. Since 1981, Daryl's Pizzeria has been serving the town of Perry, New York with delicious and amazing pizza, wings, and a variety of other complimentary dishes. Whether you are picking up in person or utilizing their local delivery service, you can always expect friendly and passionate faces from their staff. Aside from your traditional trademark food items, Daryl's also provides ice cream from Yummies in Warsaw, New York, as well as daily specials. Also, you can order your food online through their website too. Daryl's Pizzeria has been a constant sponsor of Animal Friends by helping us sell chocolate bars and calendars. Thanks to their sponsorship, we can further our education initiative and make more successful adoptions possible. Order from them today in person at 163 South Main Street, Perry, New York, 14530. Order online at darylspizzeria.com or call them at 585-237-2113. That's 585-237-2113 or darylspizzeria.com. All right, welcome back, everybody. So we are here with Dr. Shanti from the Perry Veterinary Clinic to talk about agriculture, specifically the public perception and room to improve if there is any, which I'm sure there is. There always is room to improve.
Yeah.
Somewhere.
Yeah.
So I guess the most basic generic question to throw out there for everyone to get your definition and just to understand is, what is agriculture? And before I get right to you, I just actually want to ask my co-host this. Yeah. When you think of the word agriculture, like Lisa, what do you think when agriculture comes to mind?
Farming, fields. It's just what comes to mind at first.
Yeah. Audie, what will come to mind for you?
Agriculture reminds me of my roots and the spirit of hardworking families, just like my parents were farmers. And before moving to big cities, they were farmers. And after they moved to big city, they transitioned into, I would say, service sector with Indian Railways. But to me, if you ask, it symbolizes resilience, tradition, and the connection to your own land, or afar from that. Yes. This is what agriculture means to me.
That is very, very true, and that's a lot more deep and philosophical than what I would have said. I would have said milk. For me, that's what I think about when I go to the grocery shopping and I'm looking for like hamburgers to be able to cook at home, or hot dogs, or anything, milk especially.
Right.
That's why I think of where these products come from and the roots about that. But give us your take on agriculture being in the industry itself.
Yeah, so, I mean, it's one of those things that's hard to define without using the word itself because it's so intrinsic into society.
Yes.
I definitely echo a lot of what you were saying, Adi, about, like, it being very much about being connected to land. In a more kind of clinical or scientific sense, it's the concept of anything that is involved with growing or raising food products or related food items. Right. So when I say related food items, is not everything that's grown in agriculture is eaten. So we don't tend to eat cotton, but cotton is a very important crop that we grow. So it has the crop and the animal. And I honestly don't know a ton about the crop side. It's like its own little separate sector. But the crop and the animal agriculture are intimately intertwined because you have to grow food for the herbivores that we raise, because we almost exclusively raise herbivores. So they eat plants. And then also, we're not living on meat and milk alone. We're always eating our vegetables and our fruits and our grains and all of those things. So, but it's really anything that can be grown and raised and that we can eat or use. Yeah. So it's really the critical piece of all civilizations as they grow. I mean, if you think back to way back when we were first creating civilizations and kind of coming together and being like, rather than just being separate families, if we come together, we are a little bit more stronger and safer.
Right.
One of the first big things that had to come about is the concept of more mass production, even on a small scale, of growing crops, planting seeds intentionally, having a plan, having a cycle, and then, and rather than just hunting and gathering whatever's there. So it's part of why it's hard to define is it's so integral into society.
Yeah, it is. It's integral to society as a culture and from all different walks of life. It's food. It's things that bring people together. When you were talking, it just flashed back in my mind like an old history lesson of when the Pilgrims landed here in the New World and they all hunted together. They I'm trying to remember the Native American's name. My apologies. But that's how they kind of integrated with each other a little bit, is that they were introduced to a new culture, they had corn, they learned how to hunt and things like that. And that's how civilizations start. They come together, they grow, and agriculture plays like the blood vessel, the bloodlines for a productive country.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, you have to... The drive for efficiency in agriculture. So, and what I mean by efficiency is like making it as getting the most bang for your buck. So whatever you're putting into resources, time, money, whatever, and getting out the best or the most possible product. That's driven by population growth and it's driven by society growth. So we, as now in a modern society, demand a lot of immediacy. And so because of that, we have to have very productive agricultural farms. So there's a big push for we want more of things because then it's easy to get things and then it's cheaper to get things. So that's a drive, and then things are growing, and then sometimes we grow a little bit faster than we can plan for. And so that's when you can start to get some degradation of, okay, what's our actual goal? Yeah, our goal is to be really efficient and productive, but what are we going to sacrifice in doing it a certain way? How do we go about doing it in a way that is that is sustainable, ethical, things like that? So that's where the areas of improvement is the heart has always been there and always been true of agriculture wanting to provide food. Like farmers feed people, they feed America, right? And that's something that they should and do have a lot of great pride in. But they have these pressures of they need to feed their own families in a very practical way, and that comes down to just money. There's no longer was called subsistence farming for a long time when things were small, where you grew what you needed to eat and share with your friends. And that's all you needed. You're needing to grow for other people, so then you get the money to then get what you need. And so that is a big pressure. And with, I'm not an economist, but there's been a lot of pressures throughout time where it is very hard to get a good milk check. It's hard for a dairy farmer to get a good milk check in some years. Some years it's a lot easier. So that drive of we got to be bigger, do more, can sometimes make all the other noble stuff get a little bit lost in the noise unless you're really intentional about parsing it out.
The public perception of it really is something that people should be aware of, I guess, a little bit more finer detail.
So I think part of it is kind of connected to what we were talking about is like the different pressures is media has kind of capitalized on the concept of profit and productivity, and in many ways, and not all media sources, but in many ways has kind of reduced the farmer and reduced agriculture to people who are just trying to make money. And we're all trying to make money in this world because we live in a capitalist society, so we all need money. But what it has done is taken the parts of it that are perhaps more goal-oriented and said, this is the sum total of what agriculture is. So, for example, there's been a lot of vilification of how animals are handled on farms. There have been some pretty false narratives and straight up fabricated videos that have been released that have gone throughout, over the past decade. There's been some real criticisms that are true and valuable and necessary. But it's that idea of these people don't care about the animal and they'll do whatever they need to do in order to get the product, in order to sell it. And that is just an inaccurate assessment of what the realities of agriculture is. And that has led into a lot of suspicion from the general public about agriculture. Where does their food come from? And that leads into, again, human nutrition side of people saying it's inherently unhealthy and things like that. And it's all one-faceted versus the multifaceted truth of reality.
Well, that scenario that what you just described sounds kind of indicative of our times a little bit, where you take one small instance or maybe a very legitimate problem with one farm and all of a sudden it's like it's a monolith that everyone is perceived in that light, when it happens with anything, whether it's just agriculture or you get to social issues or you get to anything else,
human health care, anything.
It's just you take the one little aspect that might be the bad grain of rice, the little black piece that's in there, and all of a sudden that's all you see. And it's in everything, as you just point out. It's even in agriculture. So absolutely. And then it becomes a war, right? So agriculture feels attacked by media and by public perception. So then they're like, we're not doing anything wrong. And that closes down the space for the improvement that there is need for, right? Because you're in a defense mode where you're kind of, huddled up. And I'm talking on a grand, country level, not specific people. And then you also have, you have the bad grains of rice for your example is that aren't being dealt with appropriately,
or that are vilified and executed in a way that maybe we could have productively changed some things with education and different regulations and things like
being
that.
proactive
Instead of
reactive.
just like, let's stamp out what we don't like and then be left with like, well, what about our infrastructure now? Because we didn't do it in a productive fashion.
Yeah, and that's going to be one of the hardest pieces, I think, for like media perception to change, because what gets the clickbait, what gets the eye, something bad, not always something good. So
Slow
it's like-
productive change is not very exciting.
yeah,
Yeah.
yes,
It's not very clickable for
Yeah.
sure. So yeah.
yeah.
So true.
That'll be something that large animal vets such as yourself, farmers, agriculture, people that are in the business in general, that are good eggs, are trying to do good by everything, are going to have to really be up against that wall all the time of trying to show, hey, this isn't bad, or we're not doing anything bad here.
Yeah, absolutely.
So that's in regards to the media aspect of things. Is there such a thing as big ag type of thing?
I mean, I have my own kind of satirical views on things, so it's like it's as real as big pharma, which to me is not really, but also I get what their people are saying. So the idea that there's this big conglomeration and this conspiracy almost to fool people into buying things that aren't actually good for them so that they can make easy money because they don't really care about the community and they don't care about the animals. That is not true, in my opinion. Now, obviously, I'm 28 years old. I haven't experienced as much as my 60-year-old counterparts, right? But it also just doesn't make sense. But it also, from what I've seen, is not true. Now, is there, like I was saying before, that balance of that push? Is we as society, we're growing quickly, we're wanting more and more immediacy, more and more convenience. So there is that push towards big productive efficacy. So there is way fewer small farms than there used to be. There's much more larger farms because the way that our economy is set up and the way that it's set up is rewarding to those, and it's very hard for 100, 200 cow dairies to make their way because they just can't get the volume necessary to get the bonuses, the premiums, however you want to talk about it. So in that sense, big ag is there's a reward, or I'm not sure the word I'm looking for.
Incentive.
Incentive, that's
Like
the
a
word I'm looking
profit
for.
or
Yeah, there's an incentive to be a larger conglomeration.
Yes.
But that isn't hand in hand with there being a countrywide conspiracy.
Yes.
And it also isn't hand in hand with there being an inherent loss of quality, though it's very easy to. It's very, very easy to lose quality the bigger you get, and that is true for any corporation of any sort. The bigger you grow, you need to be more intentional about creating the infrastructure within the company. We'll take a company, for example. Or you do lose quality because there's less oversight. There's less specificity. But it doesn't mean they're not mutually exclusive. It's just harder.
Yeah. Yeah, so there's a lot of falsehoods versus the reality of things that you just touched upon, where I get it. Like when I go to the grocery store to buy something and I want to be as healthy as I can because I'm trying to go to the gym, I'm trying to lose weight, gain muscle, all that stuff is trying to be a healthy person, this one life I'm given here. I look for the foods that say either organic, or I look for something that says like only grass-fed or something.
Right.
And obviously, when you're looking at your pocketbook, especially with the economy we currently have at this moment of recording, it's harder to look at that and say, do I want to spend the extra $3 on that gallon of milk because it's supposed to be healthier for me and it's all the best stuff? So I think that what blew my mind in prepping for this podcast is that there's not too much of a difference between that label and off-label.
Yeah,
speak.
Not in the way that people think, right?
Yes.
So I obviously don't want to diminish the work that organic farms do to do their job well. There are plenty of organic farms that are incredibly productive, incredibly ethical, and intelligent about how they run their operation. And it does take different kind of work than your average farm. I wouldn't say more, because I think that's probably a little bit of an overstatement, but definitely different things you have to worry about. But it's not nearly as much. So, for example, the National Organic Program of the USDA, so the USDA is the United States Department of Agriculture. It's the sector of the government that overarches all of agriculture. So that thing that I was having a hard time defining, they're on top of that. And one of the programs that they've done is National Organic Program, where they have a set of requirements that you need to fulfill as a producer, a farmer, in order to label the product as organic. And that applies to meat, milk, and then there's organic crops as well, which I'm not as privy to those informations. Yeah. And so having that as a set of regulations is helpful in the sense that you have to achieve all these things in order to get called organic. Right. But the regulations within them are maybe not as unique or as directly tied to health or animal welfare as people think. So the main, I guess if you want to divide it into 3 categories, is there's rules about how the animals are fed. So they have to be fed organic only crops. Now, I'm not a human nutritionist, so I can't say with great certainty that has no effect on the health of the product for the human. But physiologically, and how you're talking about how a crop is grown, then digested into molecular parts into an animal, and then created into something completely different, probably doesn't have direct health impacts on what you are then consuming from that animal, milk or meat. If it does, negligible, probably. But there may be important things about the organic crops that I'm not even aware of. So there's always room to learn, right? But that's one part of it. Second part of it is how they're treated. And that's a really important thing, because often people who care about being healthy, and more people are caring about being healthy and also being conscientious of the environment and conscientious of animals and wanting to be ethical in their consumption decisions. You're like, I'm going to be buying things. I want to support things and people who are doing it right. And so having those animal welfare kind of requirements is very important. It's something that I want people to be desiring from the brands that they're buying from. But the requirements for the National Organic Program are not unique to the National Organic Program. There's many regulatory bodies. So, for instance, with dairy, since we're in dairy country, there's FARM, which is Farmers Assure Responsible Management. So it's regulations that most of the dairy co-ops, so the companies that the farmers sell their milk to then distribute, require their farms to be farm certified.
Right.
That's kind of a tongue twister, but we're talking FAA,
Yes.
FARM capitals.
Yep.
So there are regulations for non-organic food that really mirror a lot of what the animal welfare requirements are for the National Organic Program. So it's not that I don't think it's important, it's just it is not so unique in that
it's not that much of a difference.
Exactly.
Basically, when you buy
so when you're
product.
choosing your $3 versus $6 thing, the other component that I think is really important in public perception too, and it kind of goes back to the vilifying of agriculture, is if you really want to be kind of suspicious about it, because I'm a skeptic, if you think about it, it is in a farmer's best interest to have a happy, healthy cow. Even if he's a jerk and he doesn't care about his animals.
Right.
A happy cow is a healthier cow. A healthier cow is a more productive cow. A more productive cow gives you a better profit margin.
Right.
So I'm not saying that all farmers are perfect in their healthcare. There are people who I am kind of baffled at how productive they are, because they're getting really, really lucky because they're not doing some of the things that I think are really, really important to health. But it does mean that as an overarching push and drive, as we're wanting efficacy and efficiency and productivity, we have to be making strides in animal health.
Right.
And as a veterinarian, that's what I've spent my time learning. And it's so true. In the past decade, we know way more about cattle health than we did 20 years ago. 100%.
Right.
Because even if you're talking about it from a very, dry money point of view, it's critically important.
Right.
So for example, pneumonia is a huge thing, especially this time of year. Pneumonia is a huge thing. Big weather changes. Animals are experiencing big temperature changes, different condensations, that kind of thing. So pneumonia is very common. A calf that's growing that gets pneumonia, while it's sick and while it's recovering, can lose anywhere from, I believe it's like 0.07 kilograms to 0.2 kilograms per day, which doesn't really sound like a meaningful number. Mm-hmm. But it means they can lose over a pound a week, potentially, while they're ill. And that doesn't include the medicine that you might need to treat them, the veterinary care. You have to pay for me to come out because I paid a lot of money for school, so you got to pay me. And so that doesn't include those prices. So it's costly for pneumonia, for a calf to get pneumonia. Mm-hmm. The calf getting pneumonia isn't going to kill the calf normally, as long as it's caught appropriately. Mm-hmm. It's not going to make it so it's never productive again. So if a farmer doesn't really care about the animal, you're like, he doesn't care if his calf's getting pneumonia. He's not going to have good ventilation systems. No, he does care. One, because he cares about the animal, but two, because that animal he now has to feed for longer before it gives him anything.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
So, or even something as simple as cow comfort. So the concept of cow comfort, how their bedding is essentially. So there's different styles of dairy farms, freestall, etc. But every style has a place for the cows to lay down because they are not athletes. They like to lay down. They'd rather lay down and chew their cud than do anything else in this world.
Right.
Relate. That's good.
I wish I was a cow. So it's one of those things that if a cow does not have an appropriate place to lay that is comfy and sanitary, they are much more likely to get certain diseases. Even something as simple as getting sores and getting lame. The lamer the animal, the less likely they get up and drink and eat. The less they eat and drink, the less productive they are, the more likely they are to get sick.
Yes.
Same kinds of things.
Yes.
So again, there's built-in check mechanisms in agriculture, in cattle raising, that say you got to look out for your animals, otherwise you're not going to make it on a purely financial level.
Yeah.
So people who are skeptical of people's motivations, I get it. But even if you are skeptical, you've got to realize that it is in their best interest to have healthy animals.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Did you have a question?
Yeah, I have an interesting fact to share and a question for you, definitely. So as we talk about as we said, falsehood versus reality.
Yes.
Right? So every country has government bodies, like a certain department that look over all the standard industry, food packaging and all that stuff. Coming to when you go back to India, you'll see we have popcorns right here. At the back of the popcorn, there's a label which is known as FSSAI, that is Food Safety and Standard Authority of India.
Yeah.
Just like you have, I'm just comparing. I'm not comparing, but I just want to know: is there any government body that looks over it, and how truthful they are in terms of that?
Yeah.
So, are there any government bodies which gives you label to the product that this is the standard, and how much we can believe in those, or it's just a falsehood, just like as you said, $3 and $6 pricing, which we go for, because both of them has those labels, right?
Yeah.
So how do we decide now? It's very confusing. So it's just a question.
Yeah, it is confusing, and I think personal preference is always an important thing, and everyone can have a personal.
Yeah, that's right.
But there is a body that oversees basically the safety and quality of the food. It's called FSIS, the Food Safety Inspection Service.
Okay.
It's a subset of the USDA, and its entire purpose is to monitor the safety of our food chain supplies.
Right. So,
for instance, when I was in vet school, they had food inspectors come in and basically make a pitch of, do you want to work for us? So there's many layers, many fail-safes, and internal kind of catches within that system.
That's right.
It's not perfect. Humans are fallible.
Yes.
That's why we have recall sometimes.
Yes. That's right.
You know, that's a thing.
That's right.
But the recall in and of itself is the system working. But I understand it. I mean, it makes me nervous of like, is that bag of lettuce I'm going to buy, will I have a listeria recall?
Exactly.
I don't know. And so that's a little bit of living in life.
Yeah, that's right.
But I will say is me buying the organic lettuce versus the non-organic lettuce won't make a difference in the likelihood of it having listeria. Yeah.
Exactly.
But it's much more detailed than people think in terms of like the food safety inspection.
Right.
You have to examine them as they are delivered
Exactly.
to the site.
Right.
And anything that is obviously diseased or ill. So cows will tell you what's wrong. And they're incredibly stoic. They're just the toughest, coolest animals ever.
I think I've heard that they're very emotionally, like if you compare animals, they have more emotions than the other animals.
Yeah, which means when they want to be jerks, they're jerks. No, they're very cool animals.
Cool animals,
and they are emotionally intelligent, I believe.
Yes.
And they are same way that dogs and cats
exactly.
are,
That's right.
or horses or sheep or goats or any of them. But they also, when you know cattle, you know when they're ill.
Exactly.
Usually.
Exactly.
Always caveats.
Yes.
So anything that's overtly ill, has an overt injury, including even if, say, the meat looks fine, they don't have a fever, they don't have an infection, they don't have any cancer, maybe they put their hip out of joint.
Right.
And they can't walk very well. And they're kind of just hopping along. That animal is not going to enter the food chain because they can't safely and reliably move through the humane handling setup of the slaughterhouse.
Yes.
So it's not just food quality is like, we only care about humans getting sick. It's also a little bit of, we care about also making this happen humanely.
Exactly.
There's legislation around that, Humane Slaughter Act, and I think very well, should there be more legislation in the future? Yeah, probably.
Yeah, probably.
More importantly, probably realistic ways of incentivizing or reinforcing the legislation that's already there. And then once they've been humanely dispatched, which is like a whole nother conversation that I think is worthwhile, but they basically have a humane and painless passing. Then the meat itself is visually assessed and also microbially assessed. So that's kind of ties into the other point of like the antibiotics and drugs and that kind of thing. So
I'm glad you're touching upon that right now because I've been curious about, and I only did like minor reading on this, but like obviously when an animal is sick, you as a veterinarian have to treat it. You want to make sure it's healthy, even if it is eventually going to go to a slaughterhouse or something like that. But for people who may not know what the time process is or anything like that, you're talking about the quality of the meat, the quality of the animal and its life and what we're going to be consuming as consumers.
Yeah.
What's that time period of when a cow is sick with pneumonia, you treat it with medicine?
Yeah.
What happens after that? Are we able to trust that meat?
Yeah. So the short answer is yes. There is a varying timeline. So there's actually a website called FARAD, the Food Animal Residue. I don't remember what it's actually called. It's FARAD. Stands for something about drug residues. And there's been a lot of research done on residual drugs, molecules found in meat and milk. And based on that study, they find the lowest effect level. So basically, the lowest number you can get with having no notable effect on the human, or really no effect on the human at all. And then they take that by a power of 10 to the third, lower, and that's the tolerance level. So the meat, everything we eat and consume is tested for a variety of medications, not just antibiotics, just medications that we use. There are a list of medications that are 100% illegal, and what that means is, one, if I, as a veterinarian, am caught dispensing or administering this drug, I can lose my license and should lose my license, potentially spend some time in jail.
You don't want to do that.
We don't want to do that. And even if I'm, say, not caught at that stage, if it is found at any kind of quantity, like a whiff of it in any of our food, that food is gotten rid of, and then it's sourced back. So record keeping is a huge part of all of this. Sourced back to where it came from and appropriate actions.
Like whole chain goes back.
Yeah, of like, okay, so where was it raised? But
Yeah,
animals usually change hands multiple times during their raising, right? Especially beef, you know?
Yeah.
You have the cow-calf operation, we get them to a certain age, and then we have what's called backgrounding operations, which kind of helps them bulk up to a certain stage, and then you have the finishing part where you get to the stage where we're ready to be a good food source. And so you have to try to track throughout that. And that's something that is needing more and more help. I think as technology gets better, it's going to be easier. We have different ear tags than we used to. We have regulations about what ear tags you can use to do, because used to be that as long as it had a Sharpie number on it and was in an ear, you were good.
Right.
Versus like the more electronic RFID tags and all of that. So that is true regardless. So they've done all that studying, and then they've studied the amount of time from administration to the point of slaughter or the point of consumption or being milked for milk to get to the tolerance level or below. And that's called the withdrawal time. So my responsibility as a veterinarian is anytime I either am administering a drug to an animal or giving drugs for the farmer to administer, because farmers have to be their own doctors a lot of the time. If I was out at every farm for every sick animal ever, I would not sleep, and I would only be able to see a few farms. Because it just happens with frequency, you know?
That's right.
So it's my job to educate the farmer and to equip them with the appropriate stuff. And a huge part of that and a huge part of my responsibility is making sure they know what the withdrawal time is. And I have seen the system in action where there was an animal that was treated and was just really not doing well. And so they ended up shipping it to the slaughterhouse to after the withdrawal period. They actually extended beyond the withdrawal period. And they got a letter back, basically, and they got a conversation about how there was a little bit of medication found.
Medication, yes.
And so that carcass was not included at all in our food supply.
Right.
But that was a sign of, it wasn't that they were like, oh yeah, someone wrote down that it got the right withdrawal time, so we're not even going to check that carcass.
Right.
So there's not that kind of thing going on. They're checking all of them the same way.
Yeah.
It's continuous inspection. And so that was a sign of like, yeah, in some way people might find that scary because, oh, it was sent and it had some antibiotic. But I was like, but also it was caught
Exactly.
Yeah.
in the
system is
appropriate
working.
way. So that's a way of the system working well.
Yes, right.
So if, again, everyone can be a skeptic, and I get it, and the world is scary. But living in a society, we are entrusting many parts of our lives, more than we realize, to the efficacy and honesty of others. And that is scary, but also true in reality, and we can't get away from it. And so I actually, of all our systems in life, I feel pretty confident about the Food Safety Inspection Service.
That's
right.
I feel very comfortable with it.
Yeah.
And I think it is designed well. And I think actually when people try to get around kind of standardly marketed food is when you run into more issue. So I'm not saying it's wrong to do this. I think it's great. But your friend down the road raises a cow, gets it slaughtered and says, hey, you want a quarter of the cow? And you're like, yeah, I do. There are certain slaughterhouses when you're doing in-state and you're doing very private transactions where not all of the same check marks are being gone through. So it's not inspected in the same way. So you're trusting your friend to have observed the withdrawal period appropriately and administered any medications appropriately. That works most of the time.
Right.
But it just means that when we're outside of this purview of the government, which I know we all, especially in Western New York, don't like being under the purview of the government. But if we're outside of that, then there's actually more risk involved. Same with the concept of like raw milk. Raw milk is not overseen. I'm not saying you're wrong if you're drinking raw milk. I'm saying that you are taking on some risks that you don't take on when you're drinking pasteurized milk.
Right.
So
Yeah.
very similar in
point.
that regard.
Yeah. I'm glad you explained the process of that, and
Yeah.
things like that, because it's a little more comforting to know when we go to the grocery store. Be like,
Yeah.
we know this meat is okay.
Yeah.
Because it's been checked.
Yeah.
Thoroughly.
So all meat that you eat is antibiotic free.
Oh.
Really. Because it's all checked. And then the other note, just because it's a personal passion subject of mine, is the concept of hormone free.
Okay.
Nothing is hormone free because we all have hormones. So there is hormone circulating in your chicken breast when they die. There's also never on any kind of large scale been hormones used as a growth promotant in poultry. So touting your chicken as hormone free is just jumping on the bandwagon of marketing. But also something to think about is using hormone implants to improve growth is something that is documented. It does improve the growth of a cow. It is a temporary addition of hormones. And there was a study, and it was honestly one of my favorite slides in vet school, but it was a study that was basically comparing the estrogen content of meat from a steer, which is a castrated male that was implanted with a hormone growth implant, and it had less estrogen than a potato. So,
Crazy.
even if it's not hormone free, is it really affecting your health in the way that the marketing makes you think it is?
Right. Right.
And again, I'm not a human doctor, I'm not a human nutritionist,
Right.
so I can't sit and quibble about any kind of health benefits.
Right.
But I don't know that that's worth $3 for me. You know?
They're good at the marketing.
They are
You
very
go
good
to
at the
stores,
marketing.
Yeah.
Got the better color packages. They
Yeah.
got it written right
That's
in
how you
big,
sell
bold words.
That's how you sell
Yeah.
things. Yeah.
Big, bold words. Antibiotic free.
Free. That means I'm free.
Yes.
Yeah. And so then the whole other component of it is okay,
How do we trust in this process? Like, if it is real or no?
if it's real.
Real or not?
I mean,
That's my whole point.
mean, that's-
Because I see like a lot of things are canned here because back in India it's not canned. You get fresh food.
right.
So I just don't understand like how good the canned
How
food.
good is it? So
Yeah.
that's also part of like the FDA and the USDA and the
Yeah.
FSIS are all
Right.
so Food Drug and Drug Administration.
Right.
And it's one of those things that you can have like a big existential conversation, right? About like, how do you trust government?
Yes.
How do you trust
That's right.
anything? How do you trust it if you did not pull it out of the ground yourself?
Exactly.
And I think it's one of those things that if you're expecting perfection, you will always be disappointed.
Yeah, Look, I think my main issue will be like I'm
Yeah.
from a different part of the world, and
Right.
practices and everything is totally different.
Totally
there.
different.
And when I come here, there's a cultural shock. Everything is
Yeah,
canned. You see, so
absolutely.
that thing I don't doubt government. Is it good or is it not? Just me because I have different perception because I'm
Right,
from
yeah.
different part of the
No,
world.
but you're
so-
trusting that this new government
Yeah.
that isn't yours
Yeah, exactly.
cares enough
Enough.
to do the quality that you're
because
used to.
I think I've been to more fresher qualities because
Yes.
I've seen that I'm getting the fresher food. They
Yeah.
just come out of the farm. I just eat it. It's not canned. It's not any preservative in
Yeah.
that, which will affect my body in long run. So
Yeah.
just making sure.
And
that
I think it's one of those things too that we're getting more and more data from things as well.
Yes, that's
so there is the concept that's kind of innate in us of fresh is always better.
right.
And I think, like I said, I'm not a nutritionist. I'm sure that there's
That's
great truth to that.
Yes.
But it doesn't mean not fresh is bad
No, that's right too.
either. And that's, I think, the balance is like,
Right.
prefer fresh all you want, go for it.
Exactly.
Know you have to pay a premium for it. Because when we're talking about a country as large as ours, there are people in New York City eating the stuff that we're making here.
Yeah, exactly.
Right?
That's right.
There are people several states away eating the stuff we're making
Same
here.
stuff because
So, in order to get fresh, you have to be near the source.
near this. Yes.
And that's a privilege.
Yes.
Because there are people in inner city Detroit, inner city Chicago, inner city New York
Right.
City who
Yeah.
are not near the source.
Exactly.
They would never dream of being able to go to a truly fresh,
Exactly.
picked that day farmer's market.
So yes.
So there's a little bit of that, and India's super duper urban as well.
Yes, very urban. Yes.
But then there's whole sections that are not urban at all. Like less than America.
Yes, way less than I would say. I've been to all those parts of that.
So they
India
have
too,
a lot of variety.
Yeah, and the cool fact about India is packaging. When you turn back of the site, they have green dot and red dot. Red dot. So what does that mean?
Yeah, what does that mean?
Indian population is 80% Hindus. Yeah. Okay, and 40% of those whole population is vegetarian. Right. Right. So what they do is on packaging, the green dot means it's a vegetarian food, and that reddish brown dot means
or non-veg.
Non-vegetarian. So that's a cool stuff. If you go to India, you can just turn back. If you see green dot, that means it's totally vegetarian. Nothing non-vegetarian stuff or anything is used. So that's
and
a
then
cool
red
fact.
dot, maybe no beef, but maybe
something related to
chicken, something
chicken or something like that.
One thing that gives me a lot of encouragement in our culture and here in America, in this country, is there's a lot more of an awareness now to what we're eating and how we're preparing our crops, how we're preparing the food and things like that. So you have those caveats of the people that are like, are the animals being treated humanely? Which is a valid point.
Very much so.
But at the same time, it's comforting for me to know that we have some big voices are starting to shake things up a little bit to say, hey, maybe we should reevaluate what we're putting on our crops, how we're processing things, which is good. We want to be healthier. And it's nice to see some accountability starting.
Well, and once you get in a spot where you're saying, we're doing it perfect, we don't need any changes or improvements, that's when you've made a mistake. And that goes for anything in life, even personal growth.
Yes.
So that's why I find this kind of that war between public and agriculture. Once you're put on the defense, you're not in a space of being able to, because it's so hard when you're being attacked and vilified to be like, I'm going to humbly say this is an area that we need to improve on, and how do we do that? Yeah. It's not that it's impossible to do. It's just really hard. It requires a lot of humility, and I think that's a hard ask for a whole group of people. Yeah. Individuals, sure, but we're talking in groups.
Yeah.
And then also, it's one of those things that people can use the marketing and the words and all of that to aid in the vilification.
Exactly.
So, for example, the whole antibiotic free, we'll go back to that. So, what's different about organic is that no animal in an organic program has ever been given an antibiotic. So, in that sense, it is more antibiotic free, though, as we talked about, not to the point of it making a big difference in our health. They are using that marketing on the same population of people who are incredibly concerned with animal welfare.
Right.
And like I said, there's plenty of organic operations that do it very, very well, are very, very ethical. But if you think about it, you have a farmer who's, say he's a organic beef farmer, and he's got a steer who's, still decently young, definitely not big enough to go to slaughter. And it's sick. And he has to make the decision of, do I treat now the first day that I see it sick? Right. Or do I try to see if he'll figure it out? Because as soon as I give him an antibiotic, I have to feed him for the time that he's got the withdrawal, and then sell him for an amount that does not reflect the amount of money I've put in. Or a dairy cow. Really good dairy cow, excellent genetics. Second lactation, just really hitting the stride of her productivity. She gets sick. She needs antibiotics. He has to keep her, feed her, milk her in a separate tank until that withdrawal period's done, and then sell her and loses out on any future productivity she has, because her milk is forever, quote unquote, contaminated. He can no longer have her in the organic program. So it puts the farmer in a really horrible position of having profit and welfare kind of in some ways at loggerheads.
Intertwined together.
The National Organic Program has a rule that you have to treat, that you can't not give antibiotics. I will say it is nearly impossible to reinforce that, right?
Yes.
So it's that ethical question in everyone's mind. And like I said, every organic farmer that I've personally worked with will choose to treat and take that hit. And price of meat these days is great. So you have like a newborn Holstein calf and you're getting a few $100s for it, whereas before you'd get like 80. So it's not, but at various times in history, in recent history, that's a real big financial loss. Now, you get a real big financial premium for being an organic farm. So there's why people take it on.
Yes.
For it.
But it is still that, we're talking an individual animal level, it's actually putting them in a position where they would be very easy to choose the less comfortable, less healthy choice for the animal.
Yep.
Something as simple as anti-inflammatories to help with a fever. There's rules about that.
Yeah.
So that's something that, because I think the Venn diagram of people who care about organic and care about animal welfare and all that, it's a lot of
Crossovers. And
so to know what the word you're buying means, and then realizing that you don't get to pick which organic farmer it comes from.
Right.
So you don't get to pick, well, I know that Bob is a great organic farmer, but Steve down the road don't love some of his choices. You're buying it in the store. You don't know if it's Steve or Bob.
Yes, I'll buy it because it's in the package.
Yeah, and they're the same co-op, you know?
Yeah.
So...
Yeah, it's very interesting when you explain that process of the how the organic farmer is supposed to treat their animals and how that's going to be like a never-ending conflict. It's
Right.
It's so hard.
It's hard. It takes a lot of judgment, right?
Yeah.
It does.
Yeah, and they have all these, natural remedies that they try. I'll be honest, I'm skeptical of homeopathic medicine, natural medicine in general. I think there's some great stuff for it. But the data for cows and the stuff that they're using is thin and not great. So giving XYZ extract and powder and all of that, is it going to cause harm? No. Is it going to help this cow with toxic mastitis or really bad pneumonia or, a lameness that he just desperately needs pain meds for, that kind of thing. So they use what they can, and they try to be as wise as they can. And to their credit, and to the National Organic Program's credit, you can use vaccines. And vaccines are a huge way to decrease our antibiotic use and to increase the health of our herds. But nothing's perfect.
Yes, that's right.
Nothing's perfect. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I can't imagine being an organic farmer.
Yeah.
I mean, I can't imagine being a organic farmer. But being an organic farmer.
Being a large animal vet, I go, all respect to you, I could never be a farmer.
It's so hard to be a farmer.
It's
right?
very hard to be a
hard
farmer.
to
A lot
be
of hard work. A lot of hard work.
A lot of hard
So,
work.
Lisa, you grew up on a farm, from my understanding,
Yes.
right? Yeah, what type of farm was it that you grew up
It
on?
was a dairy farm, and we milked, this is probably 30, 40 years ago.
Wow.
You milked 80 cows, and that was a nice size, and you could make a good living off of that. You can't do it that way anymore.
Yes.
Yeah. But I know I have a sister that married a farmer right now in Attica, and they have organic farm. And very few, and they only have to milk because usually you milk twice a day, at least. But with organics, they only milk once a day, once in 24 hours. I don't know how that works.
Interesting.
That's interesting.
Yes. Yeah, and then I have relation south, almost to Pennsylvania, and they only milk once a day, and they're organic.
Yeah. I think
But
part of it probably comes from the volume's less important
Exactly.
than the organic label.
Yeah.
That, and who knows, maybe their productivity on once a day is better. Because most
Maybe they're
larger farms are going to 3 times a day milk.
Right. Yes.
It's crazy.
Because
Yeah.
you get more volume that way.
Yes.
That's kind of cool, though.
Isn't it?
Yeah.
Yes.
But and then you got to think any of the things they use on their fields, you can't use any kind of pesticides.
Right. That's right.
Yes, so that's a big deal too. So
Yeah, that's actually a really great point, because if they're using something like that and then the organic cattle are eating that, how that's not...
Yeah,
No.
so that's part of the organic crops. So organic
Yep.
crops have no pesticides.
Yes. That's
I will make a note, though, that pesticides are tested for by the FSIS. But I mean, it's a valid thing that is a difference about the crops.
Right.
That they have to follow the organic crop rules, and that's one of them.
Yeah. So a farm like that you grew up on that had like 80 dairy cows, that's 80 sounds like a big number sometimes, but that's not nowhere in comparison to what we have today.
No, it's in the grand scheme of things very, very small.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. And here in Western New York, we still have a good, a decent spectrum of size. But I mean, I did an externship down in northern Florida, and they had 10,000 cows they were milking at one location.
Wow, that's huge.
In California, there's lots like that as well.
Yeah.
It's not a family farm anymore.
Not,
But yeah,
We were a family farm.
right.
Right.
Yeah.
You know, and it was my dad and my brother, and we even helped so they could have a day off on the weekend, you know, but
Yeah.
not like that anymore.
Yeah.
No.
You got probably 50 people working for you
At
on a
least.
farm
At
now.
least.
At the least,
Yeah.
yes.
Because, I mean, you're doing 3 times a day milking. You got big parlors.
Big
you
part.
got,
Yeah.
Yeah.
yeah. So it's just it's a different realm. And so that's an example, right? 30, 40 years ago, 80 cows was a good amount. Now, if you're not towards 1,000, you're pretty small, really. And so that kind of growth that quickly, kind of going back to what we were talking about
Yeah, I
before.
Production. The production has
production,
increased, population
yeah,
has increased,
exactly.
and they have more demands and supplies.
Exactly.
Yeah,
But also, how did we plan appropriately,
yes.
infrastructure regulation wise, for growth that quick?
That's
a pretty
huge.
that's a pretty big growth.
Yeah.
Yeah. And did
I mean,
we
one
plan it
generation.
properly, or it's going to sustain, or it's going to cause
Right.
problem in the
Yeah.
future?
So it's not that
All
10,000 cow dairies are bad
Bad.
by any means.
Right.
It just means it's harder. You have to put a lot more intention to
Right.
keep the quality
Right.
on an individual level even.
Right.
Because when you have 10,000 cows, you're thinking about herd health, right?
Yeah.
And death is inevitable, right? So any
One thing we all have in common.
Yes.
exactly,
And we don't want it early.
we don't. But like if we think about it, you know, the adage is you've got livestock, you've got dead stock. Is animals get sick and they die, and that is not because anyone's doing anything wrong.
Wrong. Yes.
So it's a fact of life that farmers can't be shook by one animal dying.
Yes, exactly.
But at the same time, balancing the individual care with the herd health
Right.
is like just because you're not above the 2% cutoff you
Yes,
have
right.
doesn't mean that you don't need to look at what your sick cow handling looks like.
Right.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, or what could have caused the sick cow
Exactly.
to begin with, for
Yeah.
to be a little bit more proactive,
Yeah.
or to see what's going on.
Yeah.
Yeah.
While also being wise and knowing that if you spend a lot of funds chasing down one animal, you might never get an answer.
Yes.
So it's like, again, a lot of judgment calls in farming. A
Right.
lot of judgment calls. And this is just one aspect of it.
Yeah. When you said when you referenced California there, that was one of the surprising things that I had as an experience when I went over to visit a friend over in California. How much, because when I think of California, you think of Hollywood, you think of
Yeah.
LA, you think of all
Yeah.
this different
There's a
stuff.
lot of cows.
Yes, yes. It's like they have such a big, robust agriculture industry
Yeah.
there, similar to how we have something similar here. So it's like, just comparing the two, it's quite interesting. It's quite interesting.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. So, actually, moving on from that, we're going to talk about room for improvement.
Oh, yeah.
So,
Kind of touched on it a little.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, finding ways to reinforce a lot of the regulations that are there and doing that in a way, you know, that's practical, right? So, short of a government employee being at every farm every day, which is not
That's
practical
ideal.
nor fun. Then how do we incentivize the practices that already have some inherent incentive, but really improving that? I would say room for improvement of one of the big things, especially about the meat industry, is the way it's currently set up. Is there is a huge set of monopolies of the slaughterhouses. So there's like the big five, like JBS and Tyson and all these things. And because of that, they actually influence the economical market quite a deal, because they're that final end piece. So they can create a profit from the price that they set in the store that the farmer who birthed the calf doesn't really get to see. So there's that aspect of it. And they also are set up in a way that most beef animals throughout their life, they will get shipped out west even if they're raised out east. It's a really long trailer ride.
Yeah.
It's a really, really long trailer ride. Like over a day sometimes. And so that to me is not like the most humane. I would prefer that we didn't do that.
Right.
And then you get to the idea of how do I trust it?
Yes.
If it's more local, you trust it,
Yeah.
right? Because you tend to know Bob or Steve.
Right.
Versus Bob or Steve being in Nebraska and you not knowing who they are.
Exactly.
So the idea of making the birth to slaughter process smaller scale in a more local fashion that doesn't require the premium that it currently does.
That's
When you're doing things local now, it's hard, it's expensive, so therefore the product's expensive. Somehow being able to bridge that gap and working on bridging that gap of making things more local but making them more accessible to people, fulfilling the welfare standards, fulfilling all of those things,
right.
that I think would be a huge game changer in the public's willingness to eat meat, rightfully so. And I think also would give the a little bit more vilifying side of the media less of a leg to stand on.
Right. Right.
So obviously the trailer ride's not the only thing, but that's a huge thing. I mean, it's not like they have a cushy seat with snacks and all the thing. Like it's rough. It's rough.
Right.
It's not fun. And so there's all kinds of things, that, making sure humane handling is more ubiquitous and less of a thing that the government has to tell you to do, and you do a training and then you're like, I'm done.
Yeah.
Did the training. I'm going to go back to doing whatever I want to do. And there's been a lot of proposed ways of doing that. There's a proposition about, having video cameras and having the footage reviewed and et cetera. And there's certainly a lot of logistical hurdles to that. But I think those kinds of conversations, those kinds of topics just need to keep being talked about.
Yeah. In my opinion, like, one thing I would suggest is people are oblivious about the best practices of farm animals for keeping them healthy. So I think they should make some strict rules or something.
Yeah.
Which will, or maybe we have like this podcast now to make them aware
More
of what
educated,
it could be. We are just more educated. Like, educate on them. That's why we have this podcast and we have you.
Yeah. Well,
and for informing or
to
letting
that
them know
point
what
is any little kids out there who want to be cow vets, please become one.
Yeah, just
Because we need more of them.
yes, you just need to
It's not an easy life,
Exactly.
so a lot of people don't want to do
make
it.
them aware of best practices of farm, like how you can keep your animals healthy.
Absolutely. Because people who function out of ignorance are not blameless, but are not necessarily needing to be punished, unless it's blameworthy ignorance where they're like, I was given a flyer on something that would teach me about something, but I'm not going to go because I don't need it. Which is also something that happens.
All right, well, ladies and gentlemen, we're going to take a quick pause for a commercial break, and then we'll be right back with Dr. Shanti. For over 30 years, the residents of Silver Springs, New York, and all surrounding areas have had the pleasure of indulging in deliciously crafted pizza from Pizza Depot. This small business pizza shop has become a staple in the area, known for its hospitality and excellent comfort food. They have a variety of popular foods, such as subs, paninis, burgers, chicken fingers, wings, salads, and of course, pizza. Pizza Depot has partnered with Animal Friends of Wyoming County in supporting our mission of sponsoring our shelter dogs. Thanks to Lisa and her team, we have been able to sponsor more successful adoptions. So next time you have a hankering for good pizza, consider Pizza Depot in Silver Springs, New York. Their prices are very affordable, and food will always bring a smile to your face. Their address is 130 North Main Street, Silver Springs, New York, 14550. Their phone number is 585-493-5699. That's 585-493-5699. When you place your order, tell them Animal Friends of Wyoming County sent you. Pizza Depot. My mouth is already watering. All right. So welcome back. Thanks, guys. So we were talking about the room for improvement. What else would you like to elaborate on that for any other part of the industry or the process or anything, even on the farm level things too?
Oh, yeah. I mean, I think that I was not kidding when I said if you want to be a cow vet, please become one. Because there is a need for more. There's a lot of people in even rural Western New York that there's only so far we can go as a clinic, personally. And so there's not enough large animal vets out there. Because if you don't have the large animal vets, how do you educate? How do you improve upon standard of care? How do you improve upon protocols?
Like self-awareness.
Yeah, all the things. Like how do you do that without the support of a large animal veterinarian?
Right.
So there's plenty of things that farmers do far better than us vets, but ideally we work as a team. And we work as a team with the nutritionist as well and all those things. And so that would be a source of improvement that I'd like. And, it's become a more and more diverse area of medicine. It used to be only white men. And there's a lot more women now. And I'd love to see a lot more people of color and all walks of life. And used to be you had to grow up on a farm to be given any kind of respect as a large animal vet. And there's plenty of us now who didn't grow up on farms. And so having more and more of that kind of diversity would be ideal.
Yeah.
Because the more brains and the more perspectives, the better we are.
Right.
Yeah, because no matter where you come from or your walk of life or your origin or anything like that, this is something that we all partake of. So
We all eat.
Yes.
Yes.
We all eat.
We are. Yes.
And hopefully we all enjoy it.
Yeah, and we have
Yeah.
we have diversity on the podcast.
Yeah, we do.
Yeah, we always have it.
Heavy Indian component.
Just a little extra spice today.
just a little bit.
Extra
So-
spice.
But even completely different parts of India. So
Yes, like I think she's from South India. I'm from
Yeah.
North Indian.
There we go.
From North.
Yeah.
Yes.
Now I'm from Kashtile.
Noted.
All right, so we're gonna move on to the next part of our podcast, which is the Q&A, the question and answer period for Dr. Shanti. Usually we have just our members ask questions, but since we don't really get too much of a response from that pool, we've decided to broaden it out a little bit more. So we've asked individuals, taking kind of like almost like a survey type thing, to say, do you have a question in regards to agriculture Dr. Shanti could be able to ask? So myself, along with my two co-hosts, are going to be asking Dr. Shanti some questions, and hopefully we get some of your answers for you.
Fire.
Yes, yes, get some answers for you.
We can do this.
So Audie, I'll have you ask her the first question.
Okay, so this question is from Mike from Attica.
Okay.
So he wanna know. He says, "I'm trying to make my farm more sustainable and heard about rotational grazing. How does this practice impact both the health of my cattle and the quality of milk and meat they produce?"
Whoa. Man, they are asking big questions. Big questions. So I would say rotational grazing probably doesn't necessarily impact the quality of the product they're producing, but it is really a great idea if we can execute it well for
Environment.
the environment, and then therefore, because we're taking care of our soil and our environment well, the
Right.
quality of our grass is higher, and therefore the nutrition is better, and therefore better food, better health. So I would say it's definitely something that if you are wanting to, please look into it, and if you're able, go for it, because I do think
Like
there's
it's
a
more
lot of
sustainable.
there's a lot of value to it, yeah.
Yes.
But I mean, if we tried to pigeonhole every operation into the quote-unquote most sustainable practice,
Right.
we'd end up not doing very well,
Exactly.
because every operation's different.
different.
But if it's a good fit for you, then please go for it. Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you for answering that.
Yeah.
All right, Lisa, do you have a question?
All right, this is from a Jenna from Pike.
Okay.
For us in rural areas, accessing veterinary care can be tough,
Yeah.
especially during emergencies. What do you recommend we do to ensure our livestock receives timely care And are there resources available for regular checkups?
Yeah, so it is a very hard thing. And, short of there being more vets, there's limited things we can do to improve accessibility. I will say, though, don't think of regular care as being a bonus. Creating a regular care, routine care relationship with a veterinarian is how you get them for emergencies. There's only so many of us. We only have so many resources. We only have so much time. We obviously, once we have a relationship with somebody, we have that responsibility to service them. So something that often happens is we'll get a call from somebody who says, I've had cows for 5 years. They've never ever called a vet before. And they're calling for an emergency. But I have 5 calls in the book that maybe aren't emergencies, but are calls that are for clients who I have a relationship with and I have that responsibility to. So if you're just calling a vet for the first time for an emergency, it is much harder logistically for them to be able to service that. And many businesses, because they need to conserve and not burn out people, have created a policy where we don't do emergencies for non-clients. And so reach out to any veterinarians in your area for routine care. Say, hey, if you haven't yet bought an animal, so some people have like little hobby farms where they want to buy goats, they want to buy cows. Research and create a relationship with a veterinarian before you get the animal. Mm-hmm. If you already have an animal, reach out, try to create a relationship for routine care. They're great resources, not to toot our own horns, but we're great resources. So create that relationship, and then it is more likely you're able to get emergency care.
Mm-hmm.
That's the answer.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, it's the same answer that we would give for anyone who has companion animals to establish a primary veterinarian.
Yeah, and because they're so few large animal, do it before you buy the animal.
Exactly.
Please. But there's some people who already have an animal and their vet died or retired or something, and I get that, but be as proactive as possible.
Yeah.
All right, thank you.
Yeah.
Well, next question that I actually will pose to you, actually 2 people have very similar question.
Mm-hmm.
It's regarding somewhat of the same topic. So Tom from Warsaw, and it looks like we have, let me get the right spot right. Where am I? There I am. Joyce from Warsaw. Oh, both from Warsaw. You guys have
Maybe they're friends.
Yes. They're both concerned regarding the climate of our weather in Western New York and how that impacts farms. Tom says, what are the best practices for keeping farm animals healthy during the winter?
Yeah, so it depends a little bit on your setup, right? So if you are a traditional dairy farm, then your animals live under cover, typically. And the good thing is that cows can handle temperatures much colder than we are. The way their physiology is set up is they essentially have their own little internal furnace. Mm-hmm. They naturally run at like 101 degrees. They are warm creatures. And they actually tend to deal with cold better than they do heat. That being said, they're not immune to cold, especially little calves. They can get a little frostbite on their ears, and that rapid transition, like we talked about before, it can be associated with pneumonia. So making sure that if we have a barn, making sure we're nice and repaired and we have good setup for ventilation so that we can close up and stay warm while still having airflow. Because that's the real thing that happens is you're like, oh, we got to close everything up because it's cold. And then there's no airflow, and that's when they really get ill. So doing that, making sure that we have good vaccines for respiratory issues, and then really look after yourself and your equipment in terms of winterizing it, because that's the biggest thing is pipelines burst, machines don't work, so you can't clear out pens and all those things, and that's what really can really cycle into an issue.
Yeah, to piggyback off of that for a personal question, in this, I obviously am in now the world of animal control, and so I follow ag and market laws when it comes to animal cruelty for mostly companion animals. We are a dog shelter, so of course everything is revolving canines in particular, but we do get those phone calls of there is a cow out in the field or things like that. Can you look into it? I'm not sure what's going on, things like that. And that's one reason why I think having you here will be great insights for people that are genuinely concerned about the well-being and welfare of an animal, but may not know that there are different roles for cows as opposed to companion animals, or explain the differences on why it's not bad if that cow is standing outside in the field for that long in the winter.
Right. Yeah, and I think a big part of it too is anthropomorphizing things. So we wouldn't want to be out in the field for that long.
Right.
And little Fifi, our poodle, wouldn't want to be out in the field for that long. So therefore that cow must not want to be in the field for that long. But that's not always the case. They thrive at temperatures that we don't like. They thrive in situations that we don't think they would like. So it's one of those balances of not saying, oh, they're an animal, they can do anything and they can get through anything, but also realizing that we can't use our own internal marker as the determining factor for welfare because they aren't humans. And they're completely different species. They're different species from dogs. They're different species from cats. They're different, they're the closest to sheep and goats. They're all cousins.
Yes.
Just because an animal is going through something that you're like, oh, I don't think that could be comfy. Still call and ask, maybe, because it's always better to be safe than sorry. But also realize that maybe they like it.
Yeah. All right, we are running a little bit low on time today, but we're going to have 2 more questions we have enough time for. So, Audie, I'll have you give the next one.
Okay, so the next question is from Bob. And
Not the Bob we were talking about earlier.
he's from Pike again.
Okay.
I would like to know if there are specific dietary adjustments we should make to ensure our cattle are getting the best nutrition. How does their diet affect the quality of milk and meat for the consumers?
Yeah, so again, a huge question. One that is honestly best left for a nutritionist. So specifically in dairy, but even in beef, there are people whose entire career is the nutrition of the dairy cow.
Right.
So they would be able to key in a lot more on ways you can and should change. Anywhere from storing your feed to what feed you get and how much you give it. Right. It is true, though, that it does affect the quality of the milk. For example, different rations have better butterfat content in milk and better protein.
Right.
So you can kind of change how fatty and flavorful versus protein versus anything. That's connected to a lot of things, including the genetics of the animal, but it is hugely connected to the ration of the animal.
Right.
In terms of meat, it's a little less of a direct correlation, mostly because you're talking about feed over the course of a lifetime.
Yeah.
Versus a cow is giving a daily contribution to something.
Right.
And so there's a little bit more of fine tuning.
Yeah.
But nutrition does make a difference in how yummy things are.
Yep. That's right.
All right, and Lisa, do you have one final question to close it out?
This is from Jim in Leicester. Parasites are a constant challenge for us. What routine measures do you recommend to keep livestock parasite-free and healthy, especially during warmer months?
Yeah. So that's a big problem for all livestock, especially those who are on pasture, because parasites live in dirt and live in poop. And so I would say that doing regular fecal checks, depending on the size of your operation, at least doing like a smattering to see, okay, what do we got going on? Doing regular deworming. Now, I say that with the caveat that, for example, small ruminants, sheep and goats, most of the ones that I see around here are pets. And for a long time, people said, oh, you should deworm every year. And there's a lot of resistance in the parasite population to dewormers. So that is no longer the recommendation. Less of a concern in cattle, but still a concern. So definitely consult your veterinarian. But definitely something that you should be kind of proactive about and get as much specific information about what parasites, because they're not all the same. And some are harmless, and some are not, and some are only harmful in certain numbers. And there's lots of different ways. But rotational grazing is one of the ways that you can decrease because you're resting your fields, which means that they're not getting eaten down quite as low. The lower they are eating to the ground, the more likely they are to pick up parasite eggs, and so you get a lot more reinfection. So letting those fields rest for several weeks does decrease your parasite load.
Okay.
All right. Well, thank you. Thank you, Dr. Shanti, for coming out
Thanks for
to the
having
Wyoming
me.
County Animal Shelter and to join us on the podcast. We do have this podcast live at the animal shelter, so if you hear any dog noises or barking in the background or anything else going on, that's what you're hearing. So thank you again for coming on out.
Thank you so much.
Lisa and Audie, for joining me and being my co-host for this episode.
It was my
I-
pleasure.
Yes, good. I hope you learned something, as I have, and I'm sure all of us have here. And I hope you could be able to share some of this information. Share our podcasts. Please donate to us at www.animalfriendsofwyco.com. Stream our CHOW podcasts. Watch our educational videos, including Dr. Shanti's educational video that will be out now for you. And thank you so much for tuning in. Goodbye.
Bye.
Thank you for joining us on this episode of the CHOW Podcast, hosted by Animal Friends of Wyoming County. To learn more about us, visit our website at www.animalfriendsofwyco.com. And if you're interested in adopting a dog, please call the Wyoming County Animal Shelter at 585-786-8938. This has been a production of Knox Luna Films, LLC.